Hello, this will begin part 2 of differential reinforcement. So again, differential reinforcement of other behaviors, reinforcing the absence of the target behavior. The basic procedure, first you select your reinforcement, and then you select a time interval during which you cannot see, the target behavior cannot occur, and reinforcement will be contingent upon the absence of the target problem during that stated interval. For example, in this slide, if there's no inappropriate behavior for 1 minute, then reinforcement will be delivered. You can set the interval size at any particular interval you wish, except you need to think about the inter-behavior interval of the inappropriate behavior. We'll talk about that later. So you determine your reinforcement, you select your interval size, and the rule is if there's an absence of the problem behavior during the entire interval, reinforcement is delivered. If inappropriate behavior happens during the interval, then you reset the interval and no reinforcement is delivered. So now we have two different types of DRO, fixed and variable. Fixed is an interval of time remains the same. So you might use, say, a 2-minute interval throughout the entire day or the academic session. Variable interval, variable DRO, of course, means on the average interval size. So every 3 minutes you might deliver reinforcement. So the first interval size might be 1 minute, the next interval size might be 5 minutes, but on average it would be 3 minutes. So here's a question. Each day when Jim doesn't use profanity, he receives a reinforcer. Teacher is using what? Well, it's going to be a DRO. If he's not exhibiting profanity, he receives a reinforcer. So now is it a full session or interval session? Full session is obviously what's happening. It's not simply a part of the day, an interval of the day. Okay, guidelines for effective use. Continuing. Initial DRO interval should be consistent with baseline conditions. So this is what I was talking about a moment ago. Say there's 15 problem behaviors over a 30-minute period. That's one problem behavior every 2 minutes. So the inter-behavior interval would be on average every 2 minutes. Does that make sense? So what you have to do is pick your DRO interval size to match or be smaller than the interval between problem behaviors, right? So if, say, if it's a problem behavior occurring on the average of every 2 minutes, but yet you set your DRO for every 4 minutes, then you're stacking the deck against the student ever earning the reinforcer. That is, if the interval between problem behaviors is shorter than the interval of the DRO, it's likely that the student's going to engage in the problem behavior prior to the elapsed interval of the DRO. I hope that makes sense. Email me or post it if it doesn't. So the rest of this slide, the formula, simply talks about how to calculate the inter-trial interval or in the inter-behavior interval to help you come up with an interval size of your DRO that will likely catch the student being good. And then you need to establish procedures for increasing the DRO interval. Well, first of all, the DRO at the initial interval size should be effectively controlling the behavior. That means you see a significant decrease in the problem behavior. Then, obviously, like common sense would dictate, you slowly increase the increments of the interval, right? So you can increase the length different ways. You can increase the constant time, like it's a 2-minute interval, and now it's going to be a 2.5-minute interval, then a 3-minute interval. Or increase proportionality. What this means is to provide a higher percentage of opportunities to earn the reinforcer. So as the problem behavior goes down, the frequency goes down, you can account like the average number of behaviors that might be happening per session, and then you set your interval so that you have an increased number of opportunities to earn a DRO, a reinforcer. And then lastly, you can always continue to recalculate the IRT interval and change your DRO interval size based on that information. Again, you'll reinforce at the end of the interval if there's no target behavior. Now what clinically we do is often add a second rule. if there's no target behavior as well as any other inappropriate behavior, right? So say we talk about the profanity. At the end of the interval, if there's no profanity and no middle finger use, right, because that's another inappropriate behavior, then the reinforcer will be earned. Technically and classically, DRO is simply reinforcing for the absence of the target behavior, regardless of what other behavior might be happening during the interval. But clinically, we have to tack on this other caveat. And in addition, you always want to try to use DRO with other reductive procedures such as extinction. Now, which of these would not be considered an advantage of DRO? Well, it's C, right? Reinforcement is delivered contingent upon a specific behavior because it's really delivered on the absence of problem behavior. Now we move to DRL, differential reinforcement of low rate behaviors, and it's a different animal altogether. We use DRL with behaviors that are tolerable at lower rates, but not as tolerable at higher rates. So think about behaviors that could meet that definition. Behaviors that are tolerable at lower rates, but intolerable at higher rates. I'll give you some examples in a moment. Well, here's some. Out of seat. It's okay occasionally to get out of seat, but not all the time. Off task, similarly. And what would be some others? Well, I'll tell you about a guy I worked with who would repeat statements. So every few seconds he'd repeat something he had just said to you. Now at high rates, that's very intolerable, very inappropriate, and very horrible. At low rates, occasionally repeating something you said, that's more manageable, more tolerable. So the DRI differs from DRA or DRL. You apply DRI by what? So basically, what's the procedure for DRI here? Stop the video if you want to think about it. I'll say the answer in a few seconds. Well, the answer is C, reinforcing a response incompatible, physically incompatible with the problem behavior. So the procedure for DRL, you've established your baseline rate because you need that to determine your first lower criterion. So say a smoker smokes 50 cigarettes a day. You have to know that baseline level. So then your first lower criterion might be 45. If you smoke no more than 45 cigarettes or no more than 40, then some reinforcer would be applied, right? And reinforce meeting the criterion. And then once consistently at that lower criterion, you set the next lower criterion. It's like the changing criterion design. Okay. Example. Here's the one about that fellow who would repeat statements. He would say it every few seconds, it's my birthday. And the baseline was 50 repeating statements every 20-minute period. So our first rule with the boy was, if you repeat only 45 times in a 20-minute period, you'll get reinforcement. So it's kind of odd, right, to think we can reinforce the occurrence of the problem behavior, but we're reinforcing lower rates of the problem behavior, and that's the special, unique thing about the DRL. So once the boy was consistently at 45, then we dropped the criterion to 40 to earn reinforcement, and then at 35, 30, and so forth. So think about this. When applying DRI, not DRL, DRI, what are we doing? Where we're reinforcing a replacement behavior, that's true. We are trying to extinguish the unwanted behavior. As I said before, you want to use DRI in conjunction with other reductive procedures, such as extinction. C is not true, so that makes D not true, and E is true. So I think I'll stop here and we'll do a part 3.